All right, here we go in 3, 2, 1. What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Sports Medicine Broadcast, a podcast to promote and improve your practice as an athletic trainer. I am Jeremy Jackson, host of the Sports Medicine Broadcast, and today we're talking about recovery because Valerie presented that in San Antonio, and I got some questions, and Mike was just watching it, and so I'm sure he's got some questions too. Mike Hopper is joining us because he's got some questions about Kelvi, and so we just kind of wanted to get all of that out there and see what that looks like in the secondary setting. So this is actually sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/Valerie. So sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/Valerie, VALERIE. Again, sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/Valerie, and that'll have a way to get a hold of her and connect with her and Mike at the end there. So again, I'm Jeremy Jackson, and we're talking about recovery and Kelvi. So Valerie and Mike, welcome to the Sports Medicine Broadcast.
Morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
So as we're talking about recovery, I do want to give a shout out to Blake. He recently reached out. He is a foster parent. Him and his wife are recovering because they had a set of kids for nearly a year and they were returned home. So they were taken, as foster parents, sometimes you plan to adopt, sometimes you just want to foster. Well, they were planning to adopt and those kids were removed. And that's always the goal of foster care. But just my heart goes out to you, Blake, you and your wife, as you're recovering from the loss of losing those kids that you were hoping to make part of your forever family. So Blake, thanks for reaching out and sharing your story with me as an athletic trainer and as a foster parent. So just recently in San Antonio in January, Valerie, you presented about recovery, and one of the big things that you told me was there isn't like a set plan, right? So we were talking and you're like, well, it'd be nice if I could said, okay, well, just grab the Theragun or just grab the Compex and put that on everybody and it works all day, every day. But you said there isn't, right? And then one of the things that I really found interesting was you're like, at the beginning of the year, I don't want to use the recovery tools with my athletes because I want them to not necessarily suffer, but I want them to feel the soreness, feel the pain. So let's talk about that just a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, thanks for not using my whole name on the title of the podcast. Appreciate that. So I think, recovery has kind of become a really big coin term and everyone's throwing it around right now. And it's made it seem like it's this magic pill or this magic button that you can just hit and, poof, everyone feels great. And it's just not simply that way. If you just look at your athletes, thinking about the secondary setting, my husband is also a high school athletic trainer, and I go in and visit him, and you have 14-year-olds that have barely gone through puberty to 18-year-olds that look like they're 40. How can you expect them to recover the same way when their bodies don't even look the same way, when they're in different stages of hormone rushes and different stages of muscular and skeletal development? How could we ever assume that you can just treat them all the same way? We even like to have protocols for ankle sprains and muscle strains, but let's be honest, even a protocol has to be adjusted when certain injuries don't present the same way, or there's a nuance to the student or the athlete's situation. So I really think we have to take recovery like we do with other things, and add a personal spin. So to your point about the summer, so I was a collegiate athletic trainer for 18 years. And so I had a little bonus time, we'll call it, with them in the summer, in that they would arrive to me in June. And so we had the summer workouts that were mostly with strength and conditioning. There was some on court time, and they would get sore. We were lifting heavy. We were in that training phase of trying to get bigger, trying to get stronger. And so I think the biggest thing that I try to relate to them is that this is the time of the year. This is literally part of the training cycle where we are trying to break things down to rebuild them. So let's take this time when you don't have to perform at 100%. It is not the national championship. We are not playing on ESPN tomorrow. Let's take this time to start to figure out how your body feels and start to track and trend it to understand what does work for you. I'm not going to throw the kitchen sink at you in June because I need to reserve some of those things when it is March and we're heading into March Madness and we're playing, 3 games in 3 days on TV, and the energy and your nervous system and you're fatigued and all the things. I need to have some reserves that I can throw at you then to help you feel your best when your performance is expected. So I think finding those times for those athletes and letting them have some time to kind of figure out how their body feels. again, I don't want them to suffer. If someone's injured, obviously we're going to take care of them, and that's a very different story. But I think the idea of just general soreness, getting them to understand what that means. If you had a really good night's sleep, did you wake up the next morning feeling better? So I think it's some discovery time, as well as kind of banking some of those bonus things that I can do for later in the season when they really need it.
All right, and then obviously, anytime we talk about recovery, you mentioned over and over again the sleep and the hydration and the food. And just yesterday, I talked with Meredith Sorensen about food and recovering from runs as a 40-year-old man, that kind of thing. And so, again, anytime we talk about recovery, and that goes for us as adults as well. We need the sleep, we need the hydration, we need the food. And so, I'm just thinking. I have 5 kids. Last night I didn't get to sleep until like 11:30, and that's kind of like a consistent thing. But then I have to get up at 6 so I can eat breakfast and get to work. And I'm always tired. So talk a little bit more about the recovery process and the sleep. And you said there was something about a magic pill in there too.
Yeah. So I think, it's funny you say that, Jerry, because sleeping in a hotel bed last night, woke up this morning, is just not quite right. And, age is definitely starting to hit me a little bit more. And so I think you're right. And to that point, I think the idea of taking care of our bodies holistically, and the idea of feeding it and fueling it and hydrating it and then letting it rest and repair, it has kind of gotten lost in this age of, here's a toy that you can use and it'll make you feel better. And so I think kind of getting back to the basics was really my point there, is that if you're not creating that environment for the body to heal, I don't know what you're going to have that's going to make it better, right? Like if you're operating on 3 hours of sleep every night and, not eating well. I mean, you have 5 kids. There's some, there's some parts in there, but thinking about us as athletic trainers, getting to school really early, and then you have games all night, and then you drive home and kind of get amped up, and it's kind of tough to dial back down and get into that mode. So I was actually just having a great talk with some of my colleagues about the idea of sleep and sleep hygiene. And one of the things we talked about is, can you look at your week? I was once taught everybody has the same 168 hours in their week. How are you spending it? How are you spending that bank account? We all start the week off with the same bank account. How are you spending it? And where can you make those investments? So for a student athlete, again, if they have that opportunity to kind of have some time to figure out what works best for them. If you have a really big game Friday, is Thursday night the night that you really need to prioritize and maybe get your homework done a little bit earlier in the week? Or, maybe that's the night that, some people love melatonin, or magnesium, also helps with sleep. Is that a night where, you kind of wind down a little bit early, take that hot shower, climb into your comfy PJs to get that really good night's sleep Thursday, because you have to perform at your best on Friday? We talked to them before, the STAR test and all of those other things about, did you eat a good breakfast? Did you, get your good night's sleep? It's the same thing for big performances. We're asking our bodies to do a lot and perform at a high level. So have we given them that preparation? Again, if you're not getting a good night's sleep, then it's almost like the hydration and the fuel become even more important, right? Now we really got to focus in on hydration. We really got to make sure we have great fuel, because our body's not running as effectively as it could. You think about your car. If you haven't had your oil changed in a while, and your car's been driving 12 hours a day, we probably need to put some better gas in it, or we need to do some maintenance on it. And so I think it's really more of a holistic approach in that way. And when you feel good, and again, letting those athletes kind of have some experimental time, what meals make you feel good, how much water a day is where you get to that nice balance of feeling good and not having to go to the bathroom in between every class period. And then sleep, again, are there nights where maybe you can get a little bit more? There are some sacrifices sometimes. Maybe that's not going to the party on Friday night because you have the game on Saturday. So figuring out what that really looks like. In terms of the magic pill, it really is taking care of your body. There are, again, some things like magnesium and some supplements that really can help. Again, talking with a pediatrician, talking with a physician, about what that might look like for you. But really, getting a good night's sleep really does allow your body to take the time to repair. It allows the body to kind of go through its natural systems. It allows the brain to rest, which I think is another thing. We're so on all the time. You know, we were just joking about screen time and all those things. Man, we are so stimulated during the day. Sleep is the only time that your brain gets to rest. So if you want it to be on the next day and remember plays and be able to react and do all of those things, you got to give it some time to recoup. And so I think really emphasizing that with athletes, with their parents, about how you're investing all this money in them playing a sport, you got to invest the time and resources in their ability to have the environment for their body to be its best.
Yeah, you know, we're winding down here. We start playoffs in 2 weeks for basketball, and soccer's right behind it in TAPS. And I actually just got an email from our basketball coach, you know, and he basically told the parents, don't take them to extra sessions, don't take them to the AAU stuff, don't, you know, the next 3 weeks, he goes, we practice 6 days a week, we're in the weight room, we're doing enough, you know. And getting kids to understand that, getting parents to understand that, I mean, I think we all know is hard enough as it is. And I mentioned it the other day on social media, the best practice is the getting the sleep, the getting the food, the getting the hydration. It's super, super important, but I think we have to understand, and I think too many of us, especially at the secondary school level, don't understand more of the practical stuff, the toys, right? And there's a balance. I think there's certainly a balance, you know. But I mean, our kids, like, we're at a college preparatory school here. Our kids are gonna go to college, whether they're gonna play athletics in college or not. They're gonna go to college, and so we got kids. They tell us all the time, and I just shake my head because they're talking about homework at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I ain't up at 3 a.m. I can tell you that much. And if I am, it's because I'm getting old and going to the bathroom, right? But you know, and so it's. I mean, I never did that. As a high school student, 3 a.m., forget about it. Because I knew my body could do that. If I was up past midnight as a high school kid, I was sick the next 3 days, you know. But it's just crazy sometimes.
All right, so you guys watch The Office, or you know, anybody listening. If you watch The Office, you probably know Michael Scott, and he would say something like, "Explain this to me like I'm 5," because he's just almost always clueless. And so you talked about the Theragun and the co-contraction, and you know, you talked about really using those in combination. So in the words of Michael Scott, explain that to me like I'm 5.
Well, Jeremy. What I would tell my athletes is, look, your muscles are tired, they're fatigued, or we have an issue with some things just not firing right. So they're not turning on when we need them to turn on, or in the order that we need them to turn on. So if I can't get that internal piece to work, I'm going to use some external stimuli to help that work and to help you feel it work. The main one that I used it on was for hip extension. So when they're laying on their belly, there's was that the good kindergarten term? So being able to kind of lift their leg, but actually get the firing pattern right. We really want it to be hamstring, glute, opposite erector spinae, same side erector spinae. So I saw a lot of people go into back extension instead of actually going into hip extension. So I'm going to use any percussion instrument, whatever brand or wherever you get it from. And I'm going to actually go along those muscles and actually have them co-contract with it. So I'm going to use an external stimulus. I'm going to use something outside the body to help those muscles start figure out how and when to turn on until they can do it on their own. This is not a 30-minute treatment. This was not something that I was going to spend a ton of time on. It was just real quick, kind of getting them to feel something different and start to, again, figure out their body. Unbelievable when they feel for the first time that it wasn't their hip that was moving, it was their back that was moving. You can do this again on some other things, you know, the traps, like the upper trap. People love to use their upper traps for everything instead of actually using like their mid and lower trap to like shoulder retract. And so again, using it posteriorly and kind of going up and down that musculature to get it to fire in the appropriate timing. you'd be amazed at some athletes when they realize that your shoulders aren't supposed to come up to your ears with every movement, and that there's much bigger muscles in the back, right? So giving them a visual stimuli of showing them anatomy, and then giving them a physical stimulus of the percussion instrument, and then letting them feel that and see that in a mirror. It was just a really great combination. So to your 5-year-old self, getting something to turn on inside your body because I've poked it and I've prodded it and I've annoyed it with something from outside your body.
All right. Yeah, it's like, okay, well, just something as simple as, all right, well, we need you to do a quad set. Okay, well, let's run this along the VMO. Okay, boom. Now now I have an idea. This is the muscle that should be working. Is how it should be working. So just something as simple as that, and then you can work into all the different applications of that as well.
Absolutely. And even if you don't have a percussion instrument, you can still use your fingers. You can tap, you can rub. I think that gets a little tougher because then you want to kind of start like flick, like come on, turn on. So that's why I think the percussion instrument just it gives such a high level stimulus that it's not really something you can create. But early onset ACL rehab, absolutely tapping on that VMO while you're trying to get them to contract. That external stimulus does really amazing things.
Okay, so let's go to Kelvi, and then we'll come back and talk some more about the recovery or questions that Mike might have had. So, in your presentation, you talk about the inflammatory response and how we have to have it, right? And I always talk about, like, that's the way that God designed us. If there's pain, it's because God created us this way to know that there's something wrong. You shouldn't normally have pain. It's an indicator that something is wrong. So let's try and fix it. And just recently I had a girl that, my calf hurts. Okay, well, let's try using the golf ball on your arch. Man, Jackson, as soon as I did that, the calf pain went away. Oh, okay. All right, cool. So it's not just this, but let's continue to work the whole system and go from there. So talk a little bit more about the inflammatory response, and then, I did a podcast a couple of years ago with Kelvi when they were just brand new to the market when we were at PSAT's conference in Orlando. So kind of lead the inflammation into the Kelvi and how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in today's society, we don't want anything to be wrong ever. Right? It's like, oh gosh, I had a twinge, I need to fix it. And you're so right. That's how God made us. He made these amazing systems that fire and flow, and just our bodies are really just miracles. So the inflammatory process, I think, has gotten kind of a negative connotation because we hear inflammation and we assume that, there's this huge effusion all the time. The inflammatory process is really our carrier system. Anytime there's any sort of damage, there's going to be an inflammatory response. There's going to be a cascade that occurs. So thinking about after lifting weights or after an intense workout, there's going to be breakdown. So the body's response is inflammatory. It's going to send a cascade of basically all the healing elements that we need in order to, break down, repair, and then remove that waste through our lymphatic system. And so I think, again, it gets a bad rap, and we kind of have to go back to some of our classes that we've all long forgotten about because we were up at 3 a.m., Mike. But, kind of thinking about what that response is, we need all of that good stuff coming. The problem is when our bodies aren't at their best, or they're not operating efficiently, or, maybe we're not doing a great job of the waste removal. Maybe we aren't doing a great job of getting those muscle pumps moving that allow for that lymphatic system to work its most efficiently or effectively. Or maybe there's a lot of trauma in the area, and so there's a huge inflammatory response. So again, I think we have to kind of start separating that into the silo of, is it a normal inflammatory response because it's what the body needs to do to have repair? Or is there a trauma? Is there an injury? Is it post-surgical, a contusion? I think we forget, bruises, what you see on the surface, there's a lot that's occurring down below that for the body to repair all of these broken vessels and the tissue damage and all of that. So when you have something with an effusion, or you have something that's warm and not, not kind of coming back to normal, not coming back to homeostasis in an appropriate amount of time, we do have tools and we do have things that help assist that. Pain is great, right? Pain is another normal response, that we need to know. But again, sometimes those sensors just get stuck on. Sometimes those wires are misfiring, and they're on more than they need to be, or it's laid down a pathway that even though there's not a response, or so there's not a stimulus, we still have a response. You see that in like an amputee where they have like a phantom pain. There's not a limb there, yet they're still having pain. Well, that's because we've laid down some pathways. So we have to kind of identify where on the spectrum that is, and then what interventions can we use to help assist with that. So that's to the kind of inflammatory response. And again, I think that's individual, that's kind of understanding what someone's normal response is to something. I had one athlete, she just had her lower legs they had a lot going on, and she would just retain fluid. Like she had a surgery when she was in high school, and she just really retained fluid. So we started coming up with kind of our programming and our systems for that. And she definitely was a compression sock person. She definitely was wearing her recovery tights. We did a lot of dry needling. We did a lot of manual muscle. We did a lot of mobility work because we knew we had to keep things moving in there for her to feel better and to kind of help, those distal, anatomies have a little bit of an advantage, especially when you're, over 6 feet tall. That's a long way for the body to send stuff. So again, helping to find interventions that can assist with that. We're not going to stop it, but how can we assist the body in having its most efficient system? So to your point about Kelvi, I started working with Kelvi about 2 years ago as the clinical product manager. So where you saw it a few years ago to where it is now is completely different. We're really proud of that because it's a technology. So I think a lot of our traditional modalities, especially when it comes to cryo and thermal therapy, it's some form of water or solution. So we're either cooling water or solution, or we're heating water or solution. So there's some state trait changes there, right? Ice melts and heat packs evaporate because of environmentals. So the idea of using a digital technology, semiconductor technology, is we can actually hit a temperature and maintain that for a longer period of time. So we're actually safety rated for 24 hours of continuous use because we can hit an exact temperature, measure it at the skin contact point through a digital thermometer, and then maintain that over the course of time. So what does that mean in terms of injury recovery? Well, we know what cooling is really good for, and the evidence backs up that cooling is great for pain mitigation. What the evidence starts to get a little kind of gray on is what it does for inflammation, what it does for kind of cellular metabolism. And again, a lot of that is because the traditional modalities that we've used, you have a temperature change. When you apply an ice pack, it immediately starts having a temperature change because you're applying it on warm skin. So some of our research and some of the things we've been able to do with some of our internal modeling and in our own labs, we're starting to validate in some third-party labs, but the idea of actually getting the cooling to penetrate down deeper into the tissue to slow down some of that crazy muscle metabolism that happens after trauma. Again, not talking about kind of that general recovery on the inflammation, but when we have the trauma, when we have post-op, and that knee or that shoulder or whatever joint or muscle it is angry. There's a lot going on. There's bleeding, there's inflammation, there's the pain sensors going crazy. How can we kind of mitigate that? On the warm end, when we're doing thermal therapy, we know increasing blood flow, there's a warmth that happens. People use the rubber band scenario or whatever analogy you like to use. So how can we accelerate that but maintain a safe level of warmth? We're also looking at some other ways. We know there's a psychological benefit of heat, right? We know that when you put something warm on, it kind of feels cozy, you kind of start to relax. So could we potentially use a low level heat in a subacute phase? So after an ACL injury, we know those hamstrings guard. Well, could we put some low level heat on the hamstrings to allow those relax, because that might help with our range of motion? And I'm still a full believer that movement is medicine. So how can we create a better environment for the body to want to move, right? How can we either decrease pain or increase blood flow so that the body wants to move, right? This is more preparation for all of those other things that we're doing, not the end all be all magic cure.
All right.
Okay, so I'll jump in here real quick. So talking about that technology. So we've used Game Ready here for Over 10 years, right? I've been here for 8. They were here when I got here. So that's water, right? And ice. Um, uh, Jeremy may be able to tell us. Thermex, I believe, still uses water. Is that correct? I'm not real familiar with that product, but that's, so you're talking no water whatsoever in the Kelvi unit?
So there is water that helps cool the elements, but doesn't contribute to the treatment, right? So liken it to like the radiator in your car or the Freon in your refrigerator. It's helping to cool the technology, not actually contribute to the treatment itself.
Okay. Interesting.
I know.
No,
Trust me, as an athletic trainer who does not understand cars or refrigerators, I have learned so much. But so what I think is interesting about that, Mike, is part of that is the nuance of treating based on the skin temperature versus treating based on the temperature in the box. So you're cooling a solution to a certain temperature, and then that is passing on to the patient, versus our technology is actually reading what's happening on the patient and then making those micro adjustments to make sure that that treatment maintains over time. That's where the nuance is, and that's really where we want the evidence to back up why that matters, right? What we know in theory and what some of the evidence says is that if we can maintain, then the body's not having to make adjustments. So the body kind of gets into a state where it knows it's cooled, but it's not so cold that we're having to vasoconstrict because it's so cold that the body's having an adverse reaction to the cooling. So now we get that better penetration into the tissue, which is where we know that we can get some changes with that cellular metabolism, especially again, when we're talking about more of the trauma stuff.
Gotcha. So what you said that you're rated for 24 hours, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So what is a normal treatment that athletic trainers are using it for?
Right.
Like what treatment time, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Right. So that's one of the other things, right? I ask athletic trainers all the time, how long do you ice for? Usual response, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, right? It's like the shoulder shrug, like, right? Because we don't really have a ton of great treatment parameters. One of the reasons we usually don't go longer than 15 minutes is because we know there's a risk of a non-freezing injury, right? We know that there's kind of that time point where you can start to have a negative effect, especially in some more sensitive areas of the body. Thinking about like the perineal or the ulnar nerve.
Right.
So one of the things that we want to do is actually create the evidence that gives you treatment parameters. So we did a really small study just looking at how long it took different modalities to get to numbing, which is about 12C. We found an ice pack took about 10 minutes. A frozen pack took about 11 minutes. And our Kelvi was actually coming in at like 8 to 9 minutes. The difference was that the subject didn't know that they had gotten to numbing because they didn't go through the stages of numbness, right? So they didn't have the pain and the tingling that you normally have when something is so cold. So that was something that kind of made me go, so if I'm doing cryokinetics, maybe I'm going to put a Kelvi on someone for 8 minutes, get them to a phase where they don't have pain, take them to go move for 10 minutes, come back, do another round of 8 minutes, and have another session. So now I've created a treatment protocol based on my goal, right? If my goal is pain-free movement, now I know that I need to cool for 8 minutes. If I'm trying to get depth of penetration, if I'm trying to get deeper into that knee, that post-op knee, or that bad quad contusion, or the angry shoulder that's just really inflamed and mad because of a long weekend of baseball, softball, whatever. Maybe now I need to get to the 20 minutes because now I know that's where I'm going to start penetrating deeper into that tissue. So that's what I'm really excited about, is actually providing clinicians with kind of a playbook of, hey, if this, then this, because I don't really feel like we've had that. We haven't really been given the tools to know how long a typical treatment is, because we've just kind of been slapping stuff on, and I hate to say, but I was guilty of that too, right? You're like, just kind of go do this. But when we're really trying, this isn't the like after practice, after game, like here's your thing and go. This is that Monday morning, you got something going on. We got a really big game Friday. You know, you got basketball playoffs. Let's really take a deep dive into what we need to do in the plan for the week. How can we start integrating heating, cooling, and really start using that? The really interesting thing is with the contrast therapy. So because we're digital, we can actually switch between cryo and thermal therapy really quick. Our tiles actually switch in 6 seconds, and the patient starts to feel it in about 15 seconds. That's where the research is just not good. But subjectively, we all get the good feedback after contrast, right? You throw them back and forth into a hot tub and a cold tub, and people just feel better. No one, and I mean no one, is switching out an ice bag and a hot pack. That is just ridiculous. And I don't know one clinician on the face of this earth that has the time to do that. So let's go there. So normally we're asking them to switch back and forth between a tub, which again is water, and normally just a lower extremity. Where's the research on how to use contrast on a shoulder? I haven't really found it. And I've done a lot of reading in my last 2 years on this. And so, but subjectively, I have a college athletic trainer who is using contrast therapy on his pitchers after games, because obviously softball, like your pitcher's kind of your pitcher, and there's not a huge bullpen waiting down there. And she's loving it. Well, why? Well, that's what we're going to try and figure out. What we think is, again, kind of that external stimulus of decreasing pain, but maintaining blood flow probably has something to do with that. And again, kind of that sensation piece to it. So excited to kind of figure that out. But it was funny when I asked clinicians, how long are your cycles for contrast? When you tell someone to go get in the tub, what do most people say? 3-2, 5-5. Well, why? Because we operate in increments of 15 minutes in our head, or we operate we operate like by the big things on the clock that we can see. No one's ever like, hey, I want you to do this for 7.5 minutes. Right. So I think it's really interesting because there's such, and PTs, like, especially in the clinic setting, everything is in 15-minute cycles because that's their billing, right? That's how they code things, is in 15-minute cycles. So I think so much of just our kind of traditional kind of culture in our space is doing things for these time blocks. So I know that was a really long answer to your question, but I think it dives into so many nuances of when you have something that now we can study a little bit differently, we want to provide clinicians with kind of your best practices of, hey, if you're doing this, here's some great treatment parameters of what you can do. If you want this, here's a better option. Because I don't really feel like we're armed with that right now.
Gotcha. All right, next question I have that I thought of as we're sitting here, again, because I didn't understand the technology. So you're talking skin temp, right, and having that thermometer built into the wrap. So how would that work with like our post-op ACL kid who has, like the girl told me yesterday, well, I'm gonna have bandages on for 3 days, I can't take off. What do I do? And for us with our game ready, because we're fortunate we have the resources to send game readies home with our kids post-op. We got a girl having a medial patellofemoral ligament reconstruction tomorrow. She's gonna be wrapped up for 3 days, and she goes, "What do I do?" I go, "Wrap it on over the top." She goes, "It'll actually be fine." So does that differ at all with the Kelvi because of that thermometer?
You can still, right. So you can still absolutely use it. It's just not going to be as efficient and effective, just like anything, right? Penetrating through those wraps.
Sure.
So some of the success that I've had is actually talking with my doc, especially as athletic trainers, when we know our physicians and have that relationship of, is it something they can apply post-op? Are they willing to put that on? We have actually been really successful with that in the post-op space of getting them to apply that on maybe a thinner layer of bandage. Or is that something where maybe, can check in with you? I had the privilege of that in the college setting that my docs really trusted me. So I was seeing them, 24 hours post-op and checking bandages, removing things and getting a little bit closer to the skin and then, rewrapping and protecting the area. But to your point, I don't think there's really going to be any modality that does as well when you're putting it through, layers of cotton, bandage, gauze, ACE wrap,
Sure.
all the things. So one of the things I've also told people is go up higher, right? Come more proximal. So actually apply it more up onto, onto the quad, onto the hamstring, just to kind of help with some of the pain and blood flow.
Okay.
Again, is that evidence-based? No. Have I gotten some good subjective feedback? Yes.
It's one piece of that evidence-based pillar. We know that.
Right. Exactly. I hang my hat on that one.
Me too.
All right. So Val, do you have any high schools that are currently using it? And then I know, so like with Therabody, they have a small, medium, large recovery boot, right? And so is there different sizes? And if I remember correctly, when I saw Kelvi again, it was maybe 5 years ago, right? And it's essentially a sleeve. And so is there a way to treat something like the lumbar spine?
Yes. Okay, so yes, we have high schools out in California where the company is based, and then the great state of Texas. I have a few high schools, and I have some others that have it on their purchase list for the 2022-2023 school year. I have worked with some high schools on some different packages, doing some like refurb where we've had a demo unit come back in, refurb and get that out. Just because our price point is a little bit higher than others, just because we do have technology built in. So we're really paying for the technology. As my CEO says, we're kind of like a Tesla. For some people it's too much technology, but for some people it's spot on, and that's exactly what they want, and they're willing to pay for the bells and whistles that come with that. So yes, absolutely have some high schools using it. And I think they're enjoying it because of the safety factor. So they're even, they're feeling more confident if their aides are applying it, because it's kind of a no-fail setup. There's also an app that you can pre-program different treatments into, so you can push those to the device if you need to. So that's been really beneficial, and I think doing well in the secondary school space. And I've gotten good feedback. In fact, another school just purchased a second one, so I feel like that's a little validation there. And then in terms of the wrap size, right now we are one size fits all. I will tell you, I work with some professional dancers, and I've worked with some gymnasts who are under the 5 foot mark, and our wraps fit them as much as they have fit NFL linemen. So we really do run a big span. That's part of our customization piece, is that each of the wraps has a lot of Velcro, and we have air pressure to fit. Very careful to say that, because we did not do just all of the FDA paperwork that you have to say to call it medical grade compression, but we have the same millimeters of mercury as other devices. So you can actually use the air pressure to also help with fit, especially on some of those smaller frames, secondary setting, those freshman girls, and
cheerleaders.
Yes, just tiny nuggets. So yes, we are one size fits all as of right now, and bilateral. So you don't have to buy a right and a left. Everything is bilateral. So I think that's really helpful in that scenario. And then yes, it is a wrap. And right now we have 4 anatomical wraps. So we have the shoulder, we have the low back, we have the knee, and then the lower leg ankle. We are in development of a hip and an elbow. I'm really pumped about the elbow, especially because that medial elbow, I feel like, has just been the nemesis of so many people, especially upper extremity sports. So the fact that we could actually cool the elbow for longer than like 10 minutes is really exciting to me. The wraps, though, I will say, I've had people use them in different ways. So like the back wrap is kind of just a general wrap, if you will. It's not exactly a square. It's got a little bit of an oval shape to it, but a lot of people use that on the hamstring, use it on the quad. Athletic trainers, we're kind of MacGyvers. We're going to figure out different ways that you can use something. So even though it's off book from the company standpoint, I've watched some athletic trainers do some cool things with the different wraps, and especially with the Velcro system, that you can really form and fit it to just different shapes, sizes, and body types.
And I know you mentioned this, the technology, and there's the skin temperature measurement. When I saw it, it's basically like little tiles, right? And so if you think about like the small bathroom tiles that you see on your bathroom shower, and you just kind of lay those across the leg, that's essentially, each of those is a tile that heats and cools and measures, and that's still accurate. That's still the way it is.
Yes, absolutely. And I love your tile analogy, and I would liken it to that tile that's on the mesh that can form to different things. You know, I show people all the time, they're really worried that it's, an aluminum tile, and then I roll it up, and they're like, oh, okay. And then our tiles also have some different shapes. So we actually have convex and concave shapes to get around different anatomy. So around the patella, around the malleoli, we have different shapes, knowing that, you know, you're not going to put a flat tile up against the malleoli. So we actually have like a concave shaped tile so that it fits better around that bony prominence.
Awesome. So I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
You know, Val, you and I've talked privately a little bit. You know, I think it's one of those that understanding the technology of it, it's not just another unit, right? You know, we talk about, well, like with our parents and whatnot, we have the game ready units, like I said, and they talk about, well, when we have surgery, the doctor has the unit from Donjoy or the unit from Polar or, you know, whatever, all these different brands. And I go, yeah. I said, those are the cheap version of the game ready. Like, you know what I mean? And so I think my original assumption was Kelvi was an alternative similar to that, right? Not knowing the technology behind it that drives everything about it. Because I did look up the price the other day on the Collins website, and was a little starstruck there and go, especially after a sales rep told me I needed to look at it because Game Ready was getting more expensive. And I'm going, wait a second. But like I said, with that technology there, I mean, I understand like your thought of the Tesla, you know, it's a cost point. And so I think that it'll be interesting to actually see it in person.
Yeah.
You know, not
and you do have to feel it. Like, I think that's the biggest thing is you have to feel it to believe it, not to see it to believe. You have to feel it to believe it. And I would also say, I think a lot of times we get compared to other devices that just do one thing versus the idea that our device also does the contrast and the thermal therapy. So I think that's an important piece, and one of the reasons why price point is there. I would also say, if you look at any price point in the magazine, you're like, wait, what?
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
You can tell them you get a discount of Val 20. No, I'm just kidding. my influencer status, I can get you a discount. But yeah, and I'll tell you, you know, the other thing, and Jeremy, future talk and podcast, we're actually finishing up a study right now with the Corey Stringer Institute, using our technology in a very different way. And especially for Texas high schools, I'm super, super excited about it. Obviously, if you're studying with Corey Stringer, we're looking at heat illness mitigation. I'll throw that out there. No, that is not a shock to anyone, but I'm super pumped because now we're looking at the idea of it being a technology that can be integrated. Again, not your point, not just another device that does this thing. So we're on like mile marker 2 of a very long marathon. And that's what I'm really pumped about is how we can change this technology. And one other side note, we are software based. So when we do have changes to the device, like we get feedback from clinicians or we want to expand something or add something in the future, we're going to add intermittent compression. That's a software update, not a new device. So that is one of those things that I feel like adds a little bit to the value prop, is that once you invest in this piece, you'll be able to update it like you do your phone or other things, to really ensure that it's keeping up with the times and keeping up with the demands of what a clinician needs.
Awesome.
Every time I update my phone, it seems to get slower and slower. So I'm not sure I like that, Val.
Well, okay, but you have an Android, so that's part
nope,
of
nope. So the school switched me to iPhone last year.
Oh,
yeah. So.
Oh, okay.
All right, so Mike, I know you said you got to go at 9:15. It's just
I got one more question, and then I'm gonna run to class. We're moving away from the Kelvi, Val, and going back to your talk the other day, because I was nerding out and did 2 or 3 CEUs over the weekend, getting a head start on 2023. So one of the things you talked about was with the recovery and kind of that point system. And I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch it, but also just talk about that and how can we implement that at the high school level, maybe.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thanks for bringing that up. So that point system is actually from one of my colleagues, Jason Manikowski, who is an NBA strength and conditioning coach. And he and I work together at TCU. And that's something he shared with me. I did a little bit of a different system, but that worked for what I was doing. What he basically said is based on your activity, again, they're reading it usually with a polar or some other sort of metric, is here are the number of points you need to get based on how much work output you have. And here are the ways you can earn those points. So thinking about, you know, a high school football team, thinking about a high school basketball team, thinking about the number of, there's a ton, right?
Yeah.
So we actually did a little bit of a different system with women's basketball at TCU and a different strength coach, where we looked at playing time. And if you were above this mark, you were in this category. If you were below this mark, this category. So is it something that you can get from coaches with the number of plays, or the good old fashioned eye test? You know, the linebacker that's also playing running back, that's also on special teams, you know, he's tired.
Right.
So can you assign him a higher point than maybe your deep snapper and your punter and some of the guys that were only out there for a certain number of plays? Basketball, obviously time played, really easy to go down the stat sheet and see that. So could you assign points on that? And then you're assigning values. So getting more than 7 hours of sleep, right? Now going back to giving value to the idea of sleep, hydration, and nutrition, you're showing that you get more points for that because it matters that much. Whereas coming in and foam rolling may only be a point. Well, if you need to get 10 points, more efficient way to get there is with some sleep, right? So I think you can integrate it on a larger scale. It may not be as personalized, but you could definitely put that out there. I think coach investment's really important on that as well. But would love to talk through that, you know, more with you in person too, and kind of give you some of those nuances based on what's available. You know, eating your post-game meal can be a point.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it sounds so silly, but encouraging those behaviors, right? The carrot versus the stick, encouraging the positive behaviors. They're still going to go eat stuff out of a brown bag, and they're still going to stay on their video games really late into the night. But what if we can get them to actually drink some water without something else in it? What if we can actually get them to drink a chocolate milk or something else that shows some value and some investment into that recovery?
No, I think that's awesome. You know, we are looking at, I know there's some schools doing, I know Scott Galloway's using a system out at Brewer. And we looked at Catapult, and we have a strength conditioning coach here, came down from Power 5 school. You know, so he knows Catapult, he knows all this technology, and he said Catapult's way too much for what we would need anyway at the high school level. But we're looking at for football, they're looking at possibly getting the stat sports units. You know, which again, technology, and I think that's an awesome thing for us to dig into. You know, I've told people before, most of this is going to run through football first, and then expand to everything else. Right. You know, and that's just reality, especially in a Texas high school. That's reality. You know, if you can show it, and I've said that with our strength program, that we've got to build the strength program here, and then it will expand itself out.
Absolutely.
So
and Mike, I would even say one of the really cool things about using technology in that way is that actually helps those athletes learn those things, right? It was mind-blowing to some of my students. They thought they worked so hard, and then they looked at their numbers and they're like, what? We're like, no, baby, you we sitting here could tell, you could. And it was really eye-opening for them to look at numbers on days they thought they went hard, and then realizing that some other days where maybe they were in like the orange zone was actually more draining for them than when they went really hard into the red and then recovered quickly. So it helped show them, go hard, you know, encourage your recovery time, go hard, and they realized they felt less drained after those events than they did when they were just kind of in that medium range and just really draining. So it was a lot of education that came out of that as well, as much as the tracking and trending for us on the staff side.
Sure. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Val. Thanks, Jeremy. I gotta go teach. I gotta figure out what I'm teaching in the next 6.5 minutes while I walk the end of the campus. But
recovery.
You guys have a great day.
Just watch this.
Actually, we were talking about heat illnesses, so I'm probably getting ready to show a video on heat illnesses. So Corey Stringer, once again.
There we go. You
guys have a great one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, so I know we've talked about Kelvi. Mike mentioned the price point is pretty high, and so ballpark the average person that's buying Kelvi, what are we realistically looking at?
Yeah, so we'll go with that list price. We'll just go ahead and throw that out there since you brought that up. List price for the console is just under 7,000. Then our wraps are just over 1,000 each. Just like anything, I don't know the last time, except for like government contracts where you have to pay a certain price. We're looking at packages. We look at discounts. People who are purchasing multiple, we're really willing to work with our customers. We're a small business. We have less than 15 employees, including our production staff and our warehouse staff. So when you're talking to me or another rep, I'm going straight to our CEO when we're having these conversations. So we have a negotiated price for colleges and universities to utilize secondary insurance. And then we also have some different rates for rentals. So post-op, we've started having a better uptick in utilizing that, starting to launch here in the DFW area for post-op rental capability, hopefully getting down to Houston too. I'm a Houston girl, so getting down to Houston here soon, working with some different distributors and DME groups for that. And then again, like the refurb package for the high schools, definitely something we're working on. I'll be real transparent and honest. The pandemic was really hard, especially on a small business and especially on a technology company, dealing with just all the different nuances of everything that happened. So right now we're kind of going through a time where we're doing a little strategic planning for what things are going to look like, especially with some of our new products, some of our upgrades. We're going to have a battery pack and some other things that really change how our product can be used. So we're currently taking some feedback and kind of doing some market research so that really for July, August of this coming school year, so kind of the kickoff of this next school year, we'll have some different pricing options and some different things available. So what we're really trying to do right now is get out the news and the idea of the technology in preparation for that.
You mentioned to really understand and to see it, you need to feel it. And I did in Orlando, and it was really cool. Like it just went from cold to hot, just like you said, in like 15 seconds. And you're like, oh wow, that's amazing. So obviously 15 employees, you can't canvas the country with, all right, well, hey, everybody let me come to every single high school. So if somebody realistically wants to see, feel, experience Kelvi, what's going to be the best way for them to do that?
Well, luckily, because I am here in Texas, I actually, even though I'm the clinical product manager, Texas is my state and my, I guess we'll call it my territory. So happy to come visit, but also we're going to be at a lot of trade shows. And I really do think kind of putting my athletic trainer clinician hat back on, that's a great time. And I don't know if we always take advantage of the exhibit hall to the best of our abilities. I think a lot of times we're so busy networking and catching up with friends that we don't always walk around. And, I try really hard to tell our sales guys, like, dial down the salesiness, find out more about these athletic trainers, ask them questions. But don't be afraid to go into a booth and try something. You're not going to know how something works or how something feels unless you try it. So Kelvi will be at SWATA this summer. I will be at NATA this summer. I'm going to be at a lot of the regional conventions in other parts of the country. More than happy, please reach out to me. You never know, we might be in the area and we'd be more than happy to stop by. My favorite thing, I was just at a high school yesterday and I love coming into the high school and seeing what's happening and seeing those kids getting treated and watching the athletic trainers work, it brings me so much joy to do that. So we're more than happy to come to you. Or again, we'll be at trade shows and be happy to show you the device and let you feel it and put it on. And Jeremy, to your point, what you felt is probably very different than what it is now. I think we've had, since I started with the company 2 years ago, I think we've had 5 or 6 software updates, and even our temperature range has changed. We now go from 39 to 108 with 7 preset contrast settings on the device. So the interface looks completely different, even our error codes. So it's so simple, but I was very passionate about this, that we could not just like display a number. We had to tell you what was wrong and how to fix it. So if you're not connected correctly, it'll pop up with an error that says, please connect correctly.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like it sounds so simple, but you're like, what is, E5? I don't know what E5 is. So the fact that we we made an upgrade on our software to show you what the error actually is and how to fix it.
That's awesome. And again, like I said, I experienced it a long time ago, and you know, it'll be pretty cool to see you out and about. Now, Valerie, I know that you said you don't check your like Facebook or Twitter direct messages very often. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, they want to reach out, maybe they want to sample it or ask you some more questions about either the recovery or Kelvi, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so best way is email, which is vhairston, which I know you'll have in the notes. vhairston@kelvi.com is the best way to get a hold of me, because that's what comes to my phone and to my watch, so I can actually see it when I'm out and about. I am trying to get better on the social media stuff. I think I had like a block after working with college students. I think I had like PTSD of too much social media. So I'm getting better about actually checking those and trying to look at those at least once a week. But if I don't get back to you on social media, please reach out via email. And then once we get connected, we can text, we can call, we can do all those things. I'm still very much an athletic trainer. I'm still very much just Val. So please reach out as such. You know, let me know your schedule, let me know what's going on, let me know where you're going to be, and then we can connect and hang out.
Very cool. So Valerie's maiden name is Tinklepaw. So if you see Valerie Tinklepaw Hairston, that's still her. And so if you see that on social media, again, like she said, she's not super active on there, but you can still reach out, and you know, as long as it's not urgent, she can get back to you there. But again, it's VHAIR like hair, and then STON Hairston @kelvi.com is her email. Hit her up, even if it's just a hey, let's have a quick chat with our AD or whatever. You know, she can jump on Zoom from her hotel room, whatever it is. All right. So reach out to Val.
And Jeremy, I was going to say, Jeremy, to that point, I think it's really just my heart is still in athletic training, and I just love and respect what athletic trainers do. Like I said, I'm married to an athletic trainer. I still hold my credentials. I still teach in the athletic training program at TCU. I still do PRN work. And so please know that I just love and respect what each of y'all are doing out there, just taking care of athletes. So I honor and respect your time as well. So reach out with anything or any way that I can help, assist, advocate, whatever it might be.
So one of my partners, I know we're talking about Kelvi is 24-hour rated. The Mark Pro is actually also something you can use for an extended period of time post-surgery or injury. You know, talking about the quad contusion. There's a lower entry point to purchase and that kind of thing, but each of them has their own tool. So if you want to get the Mark Pro, you can use the SMB, and it'll get you a little bit of a discount. It also like helps. I think if we get one more purchase through that code, then they'll send one free to the school or something like that. So it's pretty cool.
Yes, love Mark Pro. Use that a lot. In fact, had that in my presentation of another tool that I use in recovery. Love the Mark Pro. Gary Reinl and I have actually had some conversations about how we could use a Contrast and Mark Pro in tandem.
All right. Well, if I have an extra 4 hours, then I would have you both on, and you can talk about that.
that's a marathon event with the two of us.
Exactly. So again, sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/Valerie, VALERIE, and then I'll have links and you know, kind of the breakdown of the conversation. So check that out. For Jeremy, Mike Hopper up at Bishop Lynch, who's looking at possibly purchasing the Kelvi for the high school secondary setting, and the Sports Medicine Broadcast. That is a wrap. Thanks.